Next time you come back, I'll have a better chair for you.
Oh, I don't mind this chair.
Welcome back, everybody. This episode of the Psychic Derailleur podcast, and we have another return guest. Not only a return guest, but the guest that has so far was a part of the episode that has been listened to more than any other. Kevin Whited is back on the Psychic Derailleur podcast. Hi, Kevin.
I don't know if I had anything to do with that.
Well, it certainly wasn't me, because I've been on all of them.
It's probably the Google search. If you search it, this one pops, that one popped up. So probably not. We are pretty gripping together. So.
That's true. Wait a minute. This will make it even better. Get the salt lamp
going.
Oh, look at that.
I feel those negative ions or positive ions.
It's one of the two. So what's going on?
So things are going well. So I don't know if everybody knows this from before. I don't work for IU any longer. I work for the city of Carmel, which, by the way, for you people outside the area, the city of Carmel is our northern suburb. I'm trying to put it in relation to other cities. So it's can we say that's our wealthier counterpart to the north, right? I mean,
Is it?
Yeah, I mean,
really?
The median income is quite a bit higher than, and it's almost twice of what every other city in the state of Indiana. But whatever. The point is that...
And yet you come down and subject yourself to being on a podcast with the unwashed masses.
That's not true at all. I still live in the city of Indianapolis. But we're doing a lot of great stuff up there. That's the nice thing, we have a mayor that believes in what the work that I do, which is predominantly, promoting bicycling, building bicycle infrastructure.
It's funny because the Indianapolis used to have a mayor that believed in the same thing.
Yeah, they did.
But you were talking about you've got some conferences coming up.
Yeah, so this is for everyone out there.
Which,
these are national and international conferences that are coming to Indianapolis and Carmel. So the first conference coming up is, I think, June 4th through the 7th, or right at the beginning of June. You can look at the website. It's the International Making Cities Livable Conference, and that travels around the world. I think last year, it's an annual conference. Last year it was in Portland, Oregon, and this year it will be in Carmel, Indiana. And so if that's the kind of thing you like, you should probably try to go to that conference. The second conference, which is a really large conference, and the only reason Making Cities, International Making Cities Livable Conference could be huge too. I've never been to it, but the other conference I have been to, which is Walk Bike Places, and that's put on by People for Public Spaces out of New York City, but it's travels around North America every 2 years, and so this year, in 2020, so next year, it will be in Indianapolis, August, like the first or second week of August, and again, you can check the website out for that. So those are great conferences. That conference, 1,500 to 2,000 people usually come to. Bike advocates, planners, city officials, things like that. So 2 good conferences coming in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Indianapolis area. And Carmel.
We had a little bit of lunch before we came in and started this endeavor today. And we were talking about just how... the bike business is, every year there's a new thing that's going to save it.
New segment. Right?
This one bike is going to be the thing. And I think that stems from in the, what was it? Probably the mid to late 80s and into the early 90s, mountain biking was relatively new. And it exploded. And I think for a lot of shops, it did save their business because, bike shops were just selling, a tremendous number of mountain bikes. And ever since then, and I guess maybe we had a little bit of that in the aughts, right, with Lance and road bikes.
Oh yeah, that came back. Right.
And so bike shops were selling, a lot of road bikes from, say, the year 2000 up until, 2007, 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
And so every year now, the bike business is is trying to, find that next thing that's gonna rejuvenate the retail sector of the bike business, and
i.e. gravel bikes.
Gravel bikes was the thing. It was cyclocross bikes, and then gravel bikes, and triathlon bikes for a while, and then now it's e-bikes, but more specifically cargo e-bikes, right?
Oh yeah.
Which for the the e-bike naysayer, I think you'd have a hard time finding an argument for not doing e-cargo. So the question remains, and then to your point of your conferences and making cities more livable and more bikeable, walkable infrastructure, does that product resonate and check out at retail without the subsequent infrastructure?
Yeah, right. That would make it more popular. I like how you wrapped everything up in that.
I don't know if I've ever told you this, Kevin, but I was a speech major.
Huh. So this is, one, I want to say I have a cargo bike, but it's not an e-bike. It's not an e-cargo bike.
Not yet.
Not yet. That's probably on my next to-do is to get an e-cargo bike. But I read a very interesting article about the e-bike and e-cargo bike. I forgot we even talked about this at lunch, or we didn't talk about it at lunch because I totally forgot until you brought it up. There's all these things that the bike industry hasn't been able to do with bicycles because of weight, right? Like better braking, and it's just they threw out all these things in this article. Gosh, I wish I could remember where I read it.
Meaning they're afraid to add these features because it would add too much weight to the bike.
Right. And now we can throw some of the stuff out the window with an e-bike.
Right.
If it adds some weight, who cares? Because you have an e-assist. And if it helps with the performance or carrying stuff, or so like overly built frames or certain types of, like I said, braking systems and shifting systems. They just start a bunch of plethora of things.
Well, and a lot of those things, when you talk about more robust wheels and a more durable frame, you add, even though the motors, are a lot more compact, and the batteries are going to continue to get lighter and lighter, you still need that additional strength, just because, especially with a cargo bike, because you talk about something like a Surly Big Easy that's got a 500-pound weight limit, both cargo and rider. I mean, you got to have something that's
really robust. Yeah,
right,
exactly.
And I'm going to assume that most of the people listening to this understand what I'm talking about, or what we're talking about when we say something about e-bikes, but e-bikes basically mean a pedal assist bicycle. And there are different classes of those now. But essentially, when I talk about an e-bike, I talk about a bicycle with an electric motor that will assist you as you're pedaling. So it's not like a motorcycle or a moped or a scooter where you can just push a button and have the thing go. You have to be pedaling, and it will assist you up to, in most cases, it's 20 miles an hour.
Yeah. All right, is there 3 levels you said?
There's 3 levels, but I think the one that, as far as the bikes that I've seen out in the marketplace, most of those are going to be, limited to 20 miles an hour. And I don't know whether it's class 1 or class 3. I'm assuming it's a class 3 that will go faster than that. But, for most of the utilitarian and recreational bikes, those are going to be governed, essentially. So up to 20 miles an hour. So, and they are more fun than I would like to admit. I've been close to buying one, and it's just like, the thing that would make me nervous is that I would find excuses to not ride my bike, my regular old-fashioned, finger quotes, old-fashioned bike.
Your analog bike?
Exactly. But I've ridden Surly's e-cargo bike, the Big Easy. It's a great riding bike, and like I said, it's a hell of a lot more fun than I would care to admit. But I still think that, the infrastructure has to be in place.
Right. I mean, you're not doing the speed limit, right? And usually, so the bicycle infrastructure, in my opinion, of course, is important, right? Because that makes it feel safer for other people to ride. Like, I don't know about you. I will ride in traffic. But most people won't. We're a small percentage of people.
Well, and I find myself riding less and less in traffic.
Yeah. Right.
And for people that listen to this podcast on a regular basis, they're probably getting sick and tired of me talking about the number of fatalities, both from cyclists and pedestrians. But I mean, so. We talked about the NTSB article, the National Transportation Safety Board, that basically came out and said, yeah, we acknowledge the fact that, cyclist deaths are up, 16 or 18%. I can't remember, what it is. And, it's basically on you. Wear a helmet.
And bright clothes.
And bright clothing. Yeah. So...
but drivers, you just keep
on texting and looking at your phone while you're going down the road.
Yeah.
And so that's the other thing. If the infrastructure's not there and traffic being the way it is, I don't blame anybody for not getting out there and riding. So the thing, when I talked about this on the last podcast, there were a couple key things that I forgot to mention, and since I generally don't write anything down before I do these things, and I don't go back and, as a general rule, do much, if any, editing. I thought, well, I'll just talk about it on the next thing. So I have railed on several occasions against the bike business, the industry, as it is. And, and when I talk about it, I'm talking about the big three, right? The T's and the S's and the G's, to put it in Dave Chappelle parlance. And I have to wonder if the bike business spent 25% as much time, or put 25% as much effort into talking about bicycles as a legitimate form of transportation. If they spent 25% of the time that they spent talking about racing, how would the landscape look?
Oh,
yeah. Right. So let's not even, because I always say, we can't blame Lance. You got to go back to Lamont. As soon as Greg won that first tour, they were full steam ahead, and it was racing. So if they had just spent a fraction of the energy talking about the bike as a legitimate form of transportation, would there be a little more acceptance? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, drivers actions would be different, but it would at least change the mindset a little bit.
Well, that is a good question. I know we talked about that at lunch a little bit. The bike industry doesn't, they spend a lot of money on marketing, but we were talking about this really in bike magazines, right? In general, there's not a lot of advertising. You think about cars, the car industry. And I understand there's a lot more money in that, but they advertise in everything.
Right.
Like, I'm reading antique car articles, and a pop-up pops up about the new Chevrolet whatever. Does that make sense? Like, they advertise everywhere. Whereas bicycles only advertise in bicycling related magazines, where it's like, maybe if bicycles were advertised in Time magazine, like Specialized or Trek or whatever.
Well, yeah, and this is why it's a bit of a thought experiment, because I don't really have the answer. All I know is that in the early 2000s, we had 60 and 70-year-old women walking into the bike shops asking if we'd seen the stage. Did you see the stage today? It's like, how did they find out about it, right?
Yeah.
So the other part of, this NTSB thing is, how these stories are reported, right? How these, quote, accidents are reported.
Right.
And that there's never any blame. It's always, this cyclist was killed or struck by a car.
Right. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So the car is an autonomous object that is acting on its own. It's never, there was an inattentive driver that killed somebody with their motor vehicle.
Yeah.
So so the second part of this, kind of thought experiment that I'll be honest with you isn't entirely fleshed out is where in the hell are the advocacy organizations in all of this? Why is it that a large percentage of law enforcement officers out there don't even know the laws regarding bicycles?
Yeah, that's education.
I'm assuming that the city of Carmel is the exception to this rule.
Well, it's funny. We actually have, which is actually tomorrow, we have a bike committee that meets once a month, and there is a representative from Carmel CPD, Carmel Police Department, that comes to that every month. And so he has taken, law cards. We have law cards.
Mm-hmm.
Probably Indianapolis does. The state does too. And with all the laws, and supposedly they pass those out amongst the Carmel Police Department. So there's that. I wanted to back that up a little bit. Where was I? You were talking about...
I should have given you a piece of paper.
I know, I should have taken notes. Well, one, before we stop talking about... At the end, I want to wrap back around on cargo bikes, as we were talking about that movie. We'll talk about that.
Right.
And then... so words matter. It's funny how for years we as advocates and people with our bikes have talked about how stories are written. Before my life in bicycle planning and bicycle advocacy, I investigated train crashes. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we have that conversation because I investigated a train crash that was in Sandwich, Illinois,
yeah.
which is where Chris lived at one point in time.
That's where my mom lived.
Yeah.
I never lived there.
So it was funny because I would always get upset. I'd read articles about how that train hit somebody. And it's like, well, the train didn't really hit anybody. It just goes frontwards and backwards on a track. The person went around a gate or, ran the lights or whatever, and they got hit. Again, they hit the train. So actually, in a lot of cases, I had people hit my trains as well. So the damage is just far worse. So it is, words do matter, and I guess that's what I'm getting at. So it's interesting in a lot of these stories where we hear about a bicyclist getting hit by a car.
Right.
The first thing they talk about is he didn't have a bicycle helmet on. He or she didn't have a bicycle helmet on. He or she, whatever. They had dark clothes on. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it is really, I don't want to overstate it, but, everybody is they talk about victim blaming all the time. And it seems like the one, and I'm sure there are more, so don't get angry.
Yeah.
But that is one example of places where it seems to be perfectly okay to blame the cyclist.
Right.
Now, full disclosure, there's a lot of idiots on bikes out there that don't obey the traffic laws, that don't stop at stop signs, that don't stop at stoplights, that
don't have lights on their bikes,
that do a lot of things that are unsafe. But we don't blame every driver because of the percentage of drunk drivers out there,
right? Or aggressive drivers,
right. So, yeah, it's just all. I had a customer once that said that none of these things are ever going to change, and I've said this before, but none of these things are ever going to change until one of these lawmakers loses a family member. And then we'll start, and you hope that doesn't happen, but then we'll see some action regarding distracted driving.
Oh yeah,
because that and just people's unbelievably short. They want everything right now.
Yeah,
and that includes waiting. Running a red light as opposed to, waiting for the next cycle.
Right.
They can't be held up for anything.
Yeah, Everybody's in a really big hurry. I don't know, totally related, non-related. No, we did have a cyclist was it last year or 2 years ago, killed because somebody ran a red light, like really ran a red light.
I mean, it was.
I don't even
not
know if
that
they've
long
ever
ago.
prosecuted that person.
Well, and
that
that's
killed
the other thing that doesn't really ever get talked about. There, you know, I have a guy that I know that was a rep of ours, and he works in the industry now at the manufacturing level, and is still an avid racer, and he gets very upset when he sees these things happen. And I think it was him that said, as long as you don't leave the scene, you're not drunk, and you say you're sorry, there's no repercussions.
No, you're right.
You just killed somebody.
You might get a ticket, but that's about it.
And I mean, I would say more times than not, you don't even get a ticket.
No.
It's just, like it was a tragic accident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that is true. I remember actually, my undergraduate degree is in criminal justice, and I remember being in a class. This isn't related to bicycling. I mean, the class wasn't related to bicycling. It was about policing. It was like a general policing course. And I remember our instructor, who was a retired police chief from some police department, I don't know, from a bigger city. And like this was at IU, Indiana University in Bloomington. And I remember him saying, and at the time I raced bicycles and rode bikes a lot. I remember him saying, if you want to get away with murdering somebody, just run them over in a car if you see them walking or riding their bike, because nothing ever happened. Again, this wasn't a bicycle class. He wasn't talking to me.
It was a law class.
Yeah, it was a law class. 250 students in there or something like that. And I remember him saying that to me, and it really struck a chord because I ride bicycles at that point in time everywhere. And I remember thinking, wow, he's right. I mean, again, he said basically the same thing. Don't leave the scene of the accident, right? Don't do, the crash site. And obviously you shouldn't be drunk. But even if you're probably drunk, you'd probably get away with more than. But I just thought it was a very interesting take on the whole thing. Yeah, people, you can basically do anything in a car and get away with it.
Yeah, it's really strange. And and again, the take that I've always had is, I'm never going to tell somebody that everybody should ride their bike to work. I'm never going to say that everybody should use their bikes for transportation. But what I'm saying is, that's something that I want to do.
Yeah.
And you would think at the very least, I own a business, I've had employees, I own a home, I buy gasoline I own a car, I buy gasoline, I pay all the requisite taxes. So this whole argument that, because I ride my bike to work, well, you're not paying opportunity to use the road. Yeah. I don't know anybody. I got to think about this for a second.
You also pay property taxes, all kinds of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
I may know somebody that doesn't own a car, but as a general rule, everybody that I know that uses their bike for transportation also owns a car.
Yeah.
Especially in this town, you almost have to.
Right.
So I just want the ability to do that and not die.
You're asking for a lot, Chris.
I would think. Yeah, I would think that, again, I wouldn't think too much to ask. Let me go about my business safely.
Yeah. So
we got to have the infrastructure to do that. I mean, that's the bottom line. And I think if you don't live in the central Indiana area, then but the stories kind of resonate with you, then my advice is you have to find some way to lobby your local government to make sure that these things get done. And in the past, that's been working with a local advocacy organization, right. But they seem to have just vanished.
In Indianapolis.
Right.
Right.
I mean, I can't speak for anywhere else.
Yeah.
But
I don't know what it's like around the country. And part of the problem is I'm not extremely engaged in bike advocacy in the city of Indianapolis.
Right.
But what I feel as a citizen is that there isn't there is kind of a void in advocacy right now here, and it would be interesting. Can you make comments on podcasts or something, like not live, obviously, but it would be interesting to hear what other people say, because I have my theory on why that. I have a theory that national advocacy groups, one in particular, kind of undermined a lot of local advocacy groups around the country, and so I don't know if that had anything to do with it. I think in our case it did, but
so to answer your question and not to remember where you were,
yeah.
I don't know about the audio version. I'm pretty sure my email address is listed somewhere in that information, so they could always send an email. But if you're watching on YouTube, first of all, thank you. And they can there's a way to put comments, obviously, on YouTube videos. So.
Oh, well, yeah, let us know. I know from being at some of the national bike conferences, I've heard from other people that in certain cities that has happened as well. So, and I can't tell you why that is. I feel like more people are riding more than...
It certainly seems like there are more people using bicycles.
Right. And just so you know, I feel like there are more bike events around. And when I mean bike events, I don't really mean like bike races, very organized stuff, but like in Indianapolis, we have something called Bike Party. I think there's bike parties all over the country. I feel like there's more kind of rides like that, spontaneous type of rides, and that's not that spontaneous. That happens every month. It's the second Friday of every month. If you're in Indianapolis
on Saturday, I think.
Second
Saturday, or is it Friday night?
Yeah, it's Friday night.
Oh, okay.
Because first Friday is in Indianapolis, the first Friday where all the art galleries open up. On second Friday, this is how I time my weekends, everybody. Second Friday is Bike Party, and so they every month they have a theme.
Yeah, it's a drinking event that also includes bike riding.
Yes, it does. And they're big. In Indianapolis, I've been to a couple that were 200 some plus bikes.
No, they're bigger than they've gotten bigger than that.
Well,
yeah, it's
so
too many people for me.
I'll be honest with you.
If it gets more than 5, I get a little twitchy. So
I can't count large groups of people. I still can't do that after all the all the events I've been to. So yeah, there's a lot of people at them. So I feel like there's more of those, not just in Indianapolis and other places I've been. So it's interesting. Years ago, for those people that don't know, I helped start an organization in Indianapolis called IndyCog, which is like the first bike advocacy group for the city of Indianapolis. And I remember that was my goal, was to get other people to do events, and then we'd help promote them, right? Because being a 1 or 2 man or woman organization, you can't run a bunch of events. And so I was hoping that one day all these people would start running, people would have like urban bike rides and this bike ride and that bike ride. And it's happened. I didn't have anything to do with it, but, so that's great. My point to that was I'm glad it has happened. Where there was a Black Friday ride. I don't know if you knew that. A Black Friday.
I think so. Yeah.
Black.
Well, there's kind of a core group of enthusiasts in the kind of, I think they all kind of gravitate into that kind of Near East and Midtown, type area, and they definitely get out and do some rides, and I only know about them because of the Instagram.
Yeah.
But
and in Carmel, we started doing this thing maybe last year, 2 years ago, called those slow rolls. So we do slow rolls once. They're not really they weren't once a month. In 2020, they're going to be once a month. I think it's the second. I can't remember.
Not unlike the old A1 Cyclery Saturday slow ride.
Yeah, right. It's going to be like
rest in peace.
We've had them. They're called slow rolls, and we're going to do them next year, but they're going to be more consistent. So before in Carmel, we had these slow rolls, and they were like, I think May, June, August, September, or August, or September, October, something like that. We stopped running them when it was really hot outside. So what we're going to do is this year, it's going to be in 2020, it will be every month on that, whatever, second Tuesday or third Tuesday. I'll let you know. You can promote it. So we're going to start with shorter rides and then work our way up. So like the first month will be like 6 or 8 miles, and then by the end it'll be 20 some miles.
Yeah, and that was the whole idea behind the slow ride we went out and rode around Perimeter Road, which goes around the Indianapolis International Airport. Big, wide, very, very lightly traveled road, and at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning, there was practically no traffic out there. Big, wide shoulder through most of it, and and my idea was take people that don't really have any experience riding on the road and show them the ropes, show them how to, this is when you can ride here and this is when you should take the lane and this is how you ride next to somebody, things like that,
I feel like I went on a ride or two.
You probably did. We're older now. We've forgotten.
I forget more than I remember.
But yeah, my thinking is that if you could take somebody and kind of hold their hand through a couple of those, that would give them more confidence to actually go out and ride on their own or find a friend to ride with things like that.
It's like a gateway drug, right? I mean, one of the things I wanted to do.
The first one's free.
In 2020, one of the things I wanted to do was maybe have, and we'll see. Don't hold my feet to the fire in this one. I wanted to organize a couple of those savvy cycling courses, from the League of American Bicyclists. Yeah, are you familiar with that? I think it's savvy cycling or road skills 101 or whatever, because that's the kind of stuff too. You get people out on the road, teach them some skills, and then they build confidence.
Well, and the thing of it is, though, again, not to belabor the point, but I don't know how I feel about encouraging people to go out and ride on the road at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to have people come into the store all the time and tell me, I'm so nervous about riding on the street. And I would go, it's not that big a deal. I mean, you get a couple of people every once in a while that are, that may pass you too close or something like that. But by and large, it's not a problem. People give you plenty of space. I can't tell them that anymore. I cannot tell them that anymore.
For you people that are not from Indianapolis, I've lived in quite a few cities, and I think the only other city I've ever lived in that was as friendly to cyclists on the road was maybe Portland, Oregon. I lived there for a short amount of time, but Indianapolis, people are the Midwesterners, and they're generally pretty nice, right? I mean, so I lived in Dallas, I lived in Chicago. I'm trying to think of a few other places I've lived. Atlanta was the worst, where people roll down the window and chuck stuff out at me, yell at me. That never happens here. In fact, I've been yelled at twice in 12 years. And one of the guys stopped and just told me he was worried about my safety. He's sorry for yelling. I thought it was hilarious. I was like, I thought we were throwing down. And you just want to apologize?
I would...
That's not to take into account the distracted drivers we were talking about earlier.
Well, and I would be willing to I have a very hard time believing that the reason he yelled at you was because he was concerned about your safety.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's because I'm 6'2" when he got out of his car. He realized.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Well, I mean, that may have had something to do with it. He, chances are he did something, kind of on the spur of the moment. Yeah. He snapped a little bit, felt bad about it, and then decided to stop and apologize under the guise of him being so worried about your safety.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You give the people, the masses, a lot more credit than I do. I think as a general rule, people are pretty selfish and kind of assholes, especially when they're driving.
Well, yeah, I think so too.
You get surrounded by that metal box and you just feel like you're, invincible.
Yeah.
So anyway, we've spent too much time talking about that, nastiness. What did you want to tell me about cargo bikes?
Oh, so cargo bikes. We were talking about this earlier before we got off that. I wanted to bring up, there's a documentary. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's called Mother Lode, right? You can find it on, I think, the interweb, right? You can look up on the internet. It's like...
It's, to me, from what I found, you can't watch...
No, you can't watch it.
You can only watch trailers and
right.
extras.
And then, so it's playing around the country.
I think it's motherlodemovie.com.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Google it. It's actually a really interesting movie. If you're into cargo bikes, and even if you're not, you might learn something.
Or use the browser of your choice.
Yes. Did I say Google that?
Yes, you did.
Yes. Oh, sorry. See what happens? So, I mean, if you're here in Indianapolis, I'm trying to bring that. I've got the funding to bring you can show a copy. You get a license for a day. I'm going to show a copy of that probably. That's not how you say that in the industry. I'm going to screen it. Is that how you say it?
Exactly.
I'm going to I have a screening in Carmel at some point, probably in January, maybe February. And I don't have the location locked in, but possibly Sun King in Carmel. That's what I'm looking at right now. And so we'll watch the movie and then have a panel discussion afterwards. But I'll have Chris help promote that too, and I'll put it out on Facebook. But if you're not from Indianapolis, you can jump on their website, and it has all the places it's being screened. And then, or if you're super motivated and it's not being screened by you, you can actually have it screened or pay to have it screened.
And this is all about how people have, basically gone to, they've deducted a car from the inventory, or I would imagine, since it's, I think, was it West Coast?
I think it was filmed in Portland or Seattle or
I'm
something
sure
like
there's
that.
probably people that have just gotten rid of their cars altogether,
Right.
and are just using cargo bikes.
Yeah, and it's not just so you know, it's not an anti-car movie. It's just it's really a pro cargo bike movie. Like how people use them, how people carry their kids, how people do work with them.
I've seen it, a million times, that when you think back to like mountain bikes in the 80s, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Think back to those
I remember seeing my first mountain bike.
Those golden years.
It was a park in Bloomington, Indiana, and I was at a music festival thing, and these two cool grad students from Colorado rolled up on these bikes. Now, at this point in time, I'm riding bikes, just before I started racing. But I just remember them rolling up on these bikes, and I even walked up to them and was like, man, what kind of bikes are those? And the guy was,
mountain bikes,
these are
bro.
mountain bikes, man. They're big out west. That's how he said it.
So my point is that, there was one mountain bike.
Yeah.
My first mountain bike, I tell people all the time, my first mountain bike didn't have suspension. Not because it didn't come with suspension, because it hadn't been invented yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that one bike, it didn't matter what kind of trail it was, that was the bike you rode.
Yeah.
I mean, so, and I think because now it's like everything needs to be specialized. Well, you have your hardtail, and, you get your full suspension bike, but it's cross country specific. And then you've
Less
got your
travel.
trail bike, and then you get your downhill bike. And I think people have, in some ways, lost sight of just how much stuff you can ride with just a regular bike, as long as you can get a wide enough tire in there. Is it going to be as plush as riding a 4 or 5 inch travel full suspension bike? No, of course not. But you can still do it. And this fact that we've gotten to the point where, well, I can't ride that trail because I don't have the right bike to do that. It really is. I mean, I understand why, because the industry is they just want to continue to sell you new stuff.
Yeah.
I get it. But on the other hand, I think it's priced a lot of people out of the game.
Yeah.
And when you show somebody just how much you can do with just a regular bike, I got a 26-inch wheel long haul trucker with 2+ inch wide tires on it, and it's got a basket on the front and a big bag on the back, and we ride out to Fort Bend, and I rode some really, I hesitate to even call them mountain bike trails, but they were dirt trails with rocks and roots and all kinds of stuff, and you tell people that, and they look at you like you got an arm growing out of your head. It's like, you what? Really? It's like, yeah. And you could do it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you don't need a bunch of special equipment. So I don't really remember what the impetus, the thing that started all this off, but
Oh yeah, what did start? Mountain bikes rocks. That's what you were going to go.
now we were talking about cargo bikes. I just think there's a lot of people out there that if you can just show them what you can do with just a really relatively normal, finger quotes, normal bike, that just makes it a little more enticing or maybe appealing, that if you can do that on that bike, then I probably can too.
Yeah.
And then it's not as far a jump to I'm going to go from my, touring bike to a cargo bike, and I'm going to use that for my shopping. I mean, I've gotten to the point now where one of the most satisfying rides I do is the 2-ish miles to the grocery store on my, kind of makeshift. I've got this makeshift cycle truck, that I built with an old mountain bike and that crust Clydesdale fork.
Okay.
A big wall delivery basket on the front of it. That is without a doubt. Or, there's a new library now right next to my grocery store. And man,
oh really?
If I can ride, I'll ride. You want to talk about seeing somebody with all the smugs? The smug quotient goes really high if I can ride to the library and the grocery store in the same trip. Oh man.
Yeah, I have as I was saying, I have a cargo bike, and again, depending on how much shopping you have, you can ride any bike. But I have this cargo bike with these giant bags and the biggest wall basket they make, right? That giant wall basket on the front. And I love riding that thing to the grocery store.
Yeah.
I feel like I won. I don't know what I won, but I did. Right? All these people are climbing into their cars, and I have just as many groceries on my long bike. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's... And it makes me really, you start to think about moving, and then you really got to think, if I moved to this area of town, well, how am I going to, where's the store in relation to it? It was kind of like the way I bought cars. I would buy cars when I was younger based on roof rack compatibility.
Mm-hmm.
Because you had all this money invested in this roof rack, and it's like, when I would think about getting a new car, it was like, well, the first thing I got to do is check the fit guide and see if this rack is going to go on this new car, because, I'm not starting from scratch.
I laugh because I bought a car for the first time ever not doing that this year, and I had to buy a new roof rack. I spent like almost $1,000 buying a roof rack, and I was like thinking so I had this spreadsheet when I was going to car shop, and one of them was like, I weighted these averages, and one of them was roof rack. Well, I found this car, and I'm like, it doesn't have a rack, and I'll buy one. And then when I started looking, after I already bought it, I couldn't put my old Yakima rack on there. So I had to buy a Thule rack.
Which, nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with it if you guys are Thule fans. But then none of my Yakima stuff would fit on there either, because this is old school Yakima, right? So it's not, I guess some of it I can go out and buy.
We're well into the weeds at this point, but there was a day, boys and girls, when there were the square bar people and the round bar people, and true. Never the twain shall meet.
Nope. Anything else we wanted to cover?
So we were talking the other day, and I said that I've been just engrossed and obsessed with sailing videos on YouTube.
Oh.
Engrossed and obsessed. And it's from a couple of different reasons. One, I love the beach. I love beaches. I love the ocean. I love water. It is not lost on me that I'm landlocked in this state. And by some, social media funnel, I ended up finding this YouTube channel called Sailing La Vagabond, and
remember to look for that.
From that, this SV Delos. So those are the two that I kind of have watched more than any others, and it's fascinating because these guys they live on this boat. They maybe once a year pull the boat out of the water and spend any kind of appreciable time on land. So, that may appeal to you or it may not. As the channels have, kind of aged, they really spend time and money on equipment and then time learning. I mean, you watched me, just I did a 10-minute video prior to us doing this podcast, and just the amount of time it takes to kind of, do a very small amount of editing and get that thing uploaded. I mean, it takes a long time.
Yeah.
And so these guys have really spent a lot of time kind of honing that editing. And then, so, you may love sailing, but the photography and the pictures are really, if you like blue water and sunshine and sandy beaches, and who doesn't? They look great. But then the other thing that is just, I'm
going to throw, we need that in the Midwest, by the way.
Sandy beaches and
just blue and sunny skies.
It was hard coming back.
The sun hasn't come out in 2 weeks.
Right. So we're in permacloud season. But these folks, a number of them, I'm sure there's more than the two I listed, figured out a way to monetize their life. Really, I was going to say hobby, but it isn't even really their hobby. It's their life. And it's not unlike Ultra Romance, right? He did the same thing with cycling. He took this dirtbag hobo lifestyle that he had, and he figured out a way to make it pay. And I don't know the man. Mm-hmm. I can guarantee you that we probably agree on, other than bikes, we probably agree on nothing. But I respect the hell out of him because he recognized this. Is that you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Should I turn that off?
No, it's fine. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't. I've run the recorder out of batteries once before.
Oh. I feel like on one of our interviews they did.
No, maybe. But he caught it right at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And they figured out a way to monetize this. But you can't do that without good content, right? So it can't be, I just want to sail around the world.
Yeah.
You should send me money.
Yeah.
It's, I want to sail around the world, and I'm also going to work my tail off producing this content that hopefully you will like. And if you do, maybe you'll throw us a couple of bucks every once in a while. And astonishingly, a huge number of people do. And it I guess, pays them enough money to keep the boat in the water month after month after month after month.
Yeah, sure.
So what I didn't know, well, somebody asked me if my plan was to try to do this, and I said, I don't know that, you have to be willing to, you have to sell a lifestyle, right? And I don't know if anybody out there is going to be willing to monetize a overweight mid-50s bike shop owner that drinks a little too much.
That sounds like a sitcom.
Yeah, well. But anyway, what I didn't know as we started talking about this was you know how to sail.
Oh, yeah, yes.
How'd that happen?
I grew up sailing. So I grew up on Lake Michigan.
So that's real water. That's not...
Yeah, for those people that are not from the area, what is that, 300 and some miles long, a couple hundred and some miles wide?
All I know is that it's a large, very daunting body of water. I had a buddy that lived in Chicago, and he took me kayaking on Lake Michigan once, and it was a butt-clenching, experience. But we were paddling south along the lakeshore, right along, and I say south because I'm assuming south because the land was to my right, and we paddled out of Diversey Harbor, which was really daunting because you had huge boats also going out of Diversey Harbor. And we took a right, and we were paddling along the shore there. And, you'd look to the right and you could see, land on all the buildings. And then you would look to the left, and it was nothing but water.
Water to the horizon.
Yeah.
And then some intake buildings, those buildings out in the water.
But it was humbling is what it was.
Yeah. Yeah, it was nice. I grew up sailing. It was my father taught me how to sail as a kid. And when I said we grew up in Lake Michigan, I grew up 3 or 4 houses off the beach, so we didn't have that primo lakefront property. But Still have a sailboat there sitting in the sand dunes I take out when I go up and visit. And then I had several sailboats over the years. And then when I lived in Chicago and investigated train crashes and did some other stuff, I actually bought a 33-foot sailboat and kept it in Belmont Harbor and would sail to Michigan on weekends and stuff. So, yeah, and I sailed in other places around the world.
And you're going to teach me how to sail.
And this summer we're going to learn how to sail.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Because my little brother, my baby brother, lives in Fort Lauderdale, and his girlfriend is a boating captain, and she also, I don't think, knows how to sail. We were talking about that when I was down there, that she had somebody that was going to also teach her how to sail. But we've been talking about just motoring to Bimini. So from Fort Lauderdale to Bimini is like 2.5 hours.
Right.
Circling back to blue skies, blue water, and sandy beaches. But it's only like, I think, if you've got favorable winds, it's only like 5 or 6. That's like half a day.
That's what I've heard.
5 or 6 hours from
Yeah.
South Florida
Yeah.
to the Bahamas.
That's what I've heard. I've never sailed there, so I wouldn't know. But Virgin Islands, yes.
The thing about it in, Lake Michigan, I would think that you'd really have to be on your toes, because it can get dicey out there.
It gets dicey fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a few times I was, in the smaller boats, yes, but even on that bigger boat, there was a few times I was out once by myself, man, and the storm just came out of nowhere. All right. Now, granted, if I had like all the stuff that one would have on a large boat, if you're sailing around the world, I probably would have had something beep and tell me there was a storm coming, but
right.
I did not. It was dicey, but it was fun.
So I watch these videos, and it's like if you're hopping from island to island, I'm in.
Yeah.
But it's when they take these passages, right, where they're 8, 10, 16 days at sea going across the Atlantic or the Indian Ocean, and it's like, I don't know about all that.
No.
I tell you what, you sail the boat, I'm going to get on a plane.
Yeah.
And I'll meet you there.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never done anything like that. I mean, the longest I've ever been out to sea, quote unquote, is probably 3 days, 2 or 3 days. So that's about it.
Yeah.
It's a long
That's
time.
probably enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're even big boats are small. Right? Does that make sense?
Right, absolutely. Yeah. Because again, most of these videos, they're 45 to 50 plus foot boats. Yeah. And it ain't enough.
No, try spending weeks like walking around 50 feet.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
with other people.
Right. I mean, in some of these cases, it'll be six people on a 53-foot boat.
Yeah.
You get to know each other real quick.
Yeah.
Real quick. But yeah, I'm excited about that. I think, I find that I'm continually trying to find ways to slow down. Right? Everything's coming at us so fast. Information especially.
Yeah.
It's coming at us so fast. And I think that's what's leading to a lot of this, aggression out on the road, is that, you're used to everything coming at you so fast. If you've got to wait at a red light for an extra, minute and a half, that is a major inconvenience.
Yeah.
So I'm continually looking for ways to kind of disconnect from all that, right? So whether it's, going out and just going for a damn walk, just in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Or my neighborhood and the adjacent neighborhood, just to get out of my head for an hour.
Yeah, I do these things where I don't pick my phone up. Like now we did this earlier. You're talking about something, you can't remember what the movie was about or what the song was or da-da-da. You just jump on and search it up.
Right.
Who was in this movie? Da-da-da.
Right.
And so I try not to do that all the time. And totally on a related note, by the way, I like how you pulled that back in to bicycling. My kids,
I'm getting better at this.
So I'm sure, if you don't have kids, you don't see this, but our kids are so used to everything. My one son has both my kids have a laptop and they have an iPhone. Then we share an iPad, right? Like all this information. I'm wondering when they drive, since they're used to having everything instantaneously sent to them, right? Like, and watch almost any movie. We have Netflix, we have this, we have that. I wonder if they're going to be worse,
For sure.
right? Like, why want to go there? And I want to go there now.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, they certainly are going to be different.
Yeah. I don't know.
It can't, you'd be, I think, naive to think that it's not going to change them in some way.
Yeah.
I was talking kind of via, this is unrelated, but not entirely, that I have a handful of friends on Facebook that I went to high school with. And one of these women, she was a girl when I knew her,
There you go.
posted something about our generation, meaning, Gen X, was the yeah, I mean, it's a generation that nobody ever talks about, right? And I said, I thought that it was because we were the last generation, one, with any kind of freedom, right? If you think about the baby boomers, generally didn't grow up, they grew up with both parents, right? So you didn't really have a lot of latchkey kids in the boomer generation, but you had a whole lot of them in Gen X, everybody that I knew. So we had all this freedom, right? And we have continued to act accordingly. It's like nobody had to tell us to do anything. We just did it because there wasn't anybody around.
Yeah.
So we were the last generation to have any modicum of freedom where, you went out the door at 9 o'clock in the morning. Yeah.
Yes.
And your mom just, if there was anybody home at all, they just were like, well, just make sure you're home for dinner.
Yeah. Yes.
And that was it.
Yeah. That's how we were raised too.
Exactly. And it's like, I don't, certainly, I don't think anybody feels like they can do that with their kids now. And maybe there's, there may be good reasons for that and maybe there isn't,
Right.
but, I just think that, again, I don't know what the hell why the hell I started that down that road to begin with.
Well, I can run somewhere with this if you want.
Sure, go ahead.
So, it's funny because
Save me from myself.
Indianapolis, right? We live in Indianapolis, as we said, and it's a really good city for freedom. So, for kids' freedom, I should say. So, I'm a Generation Xer as well. I would run around all day long. So I try to do that I try to let my kids have some freedom. So my kids, we live in the city. The kids ride their bikes around. We have a lot of bicycles. We live right off the Monon Trail, which is this major greenway that runs basically from downtown Indianapolis up into the northern suburbs. And we live in the area on the north side where there's a lot of commercial nodes, right? So for those people that don't know, like there's restaurants and stores and da-da-da. So my kids... And now we have this red line. You've talked about that before. Once this BRT system, my kids I have a BRT station within a rock throw of my house, and hopefully my kids don't throw rocks at it. But they can walk over, jump on that thing, and go to Broadville, which is a larger commercial area.
A village.
A village within the city of.
Not to interrupt you, but speaking of your kids, what time did you need to pick up your son?
What time is it?
What time do you need to pick him up?
2:30.
Okay, we got a little more time.
Okay. So, I just wanted to bring that up, which is great, about Indianapolis. Like my kids can ride their bicycles around. There's enough infrastructure in my area. There's places for them to ride too. So my kids, one of my kids rides to school frequently, not as much as I'd like them to, but they still do. He took the BRT or the red line to school last week. That was a big deal. So yeah.
I did talk about it. It's like, I hope they get it squared away, and I hope that people still continue to use it now that it's not free.
Yeah, that started Sunday. So I think there'll probably be a dip like anything.
Sure.
A little bit, while people are trying to figure out, like, how do you pay for it? I mean, you were talking about this, not to keep wrapping everything that, like if you can get people on their bicycles and experience bicycle riding, a lot of times that's a big hump to get them over, right? Same thing, believe it or not, I've worked in the transportation industry a long time. Some people won't take the bus or the train because they don't know how to pay for it. Literally, that's a stumbling block for them.
Sure.
So these organizations around the country that I've worked at, different transit agencies they actually will set up payment stands, like fake payment stands at like events, and so you can learn how to like put your money in.
Oh.
Right? Like, this is how you get on the bus. So the door's open and you put your money in this thing, or you put your card here. So that's kind of interesting. So I think you'll see a little bit of that, but hopefully.
Yeah, I hope people use it. The thing that was really disheartening to me was just the naysayers that, the ones that had no constructive input prior to the vote.
Yeah.
Much less prior to the rollout.
Yeah.
And then just were almost rubbing their hands, gleefully when it started to when problems started to arise.
Again, it's a new service, so there's going to be problems, right? Like they tried these rubber matting things that were stapled. They're not really stapled. That's not the term, but they used rebar and stuck them into the ground. Well, that wasn't working really well, and so they're putting concrete in now. They actually started in Broadway Bowl, I noticed last night, and they're working their way south down College. So it's, there's a little median on the north side. There's a little median. It's probably like, I don't know, 6 to 8 inches tall, but it's drivable for the buses and the emergency vehicles. So like a fire truck can go up on and around it. So anytime anything like that happens, when those rubber things started popping up, everyone's like, they're idiots, right? That kind of thing. It's like, this is the deal. We're a new system, and so not everybody, in certain cities, they had bollards. I've been on the BRT in Cleveland, and they had a different system set up, right?
Well, and I think the big thing is when, because the one thing that I did hear prior to, this thing being kind of finalized was the fact that the batteries just don't hold a charge in cold weather.
Yeah.
And then, sure enough, we had all that little, that little spate of cold weather, and the damn buses wouldn't run. They wouldn't run
as long. Yeah, they were running fine. Yeah. So the deal is that the nice thing is that BYD had given them they bought them, but buses earlier to try out, and so they, the nice thing is when people are starting to beat up on Indigo, like they tried those buses out, and so they knew way before the service that they were going to have issues, even though they've already signed a contract with BYD, which is, by the way, is the largest electric bus manufacturer in the world, right? So BYD had to, they said to BYD, this is the deal. You told us we can go. I'm making the number up. I don't remember. Was it 300 miles or 200 miles? Whatever it was to a charge, 250 to 300 miles. And they're not doing that. And so BYD is like, all right, well, on our dime, we'll fix that. So they don't have the capacity to put more batteries in at this point in time. The nice thing is about electric buses and electric vehicles is usually the batteries are modular. So when they get better batteries, they can probably slide those in. But so what they're doing is putting, this is for you guys, they're putting chargers on the system, right?
I didn't know that.
Oh, I'm sorry. With me, so they're going to put a charger at the end of the line. I think it's by the mall in Greenwood, and a charger on the north end. I think that's how it's going to work. And so they can speed charge them really quickly. 440, is that 480 watts, something like that? And they speed charge.
Well, it was just, like I said, I said the same thing when we rolled out the bike share, and everybody was saying it's never going to work here.
Yeah.
Right. They may work in other places, but it's not going to work here. And that's one of the disheartening things about living in the state of Indiana is that it always seems like it doesn't matter what it is. It's fine for anybody else, but it's not going to work here. We can't have daylight savings here. We can't buy alcohol on Sunday here. We can't have bike share here. Yeah. And then it turns out that, not only can we have it, but it works quite well.
You can tell them we have the most used bike share system, we did anyways, in the United States. I mean, it would beat out Denver's, which was number one for years.
Well, and they just added, 270 bikes and another,
something like that.
A handful of stations. So,
and I wish them all the luck on that. That's great.
So you need to go pick up your kids.
Okay. All right.
As always, thanks for coming back in.
All right.
My pleasure. Sure.
All right. Thanks.
And as always, thanks for watching and listening and subscribing and commenting. I probably will not do another one of these prior to Christmas. So if that's your deal, if you're in on that, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, all that jazz.
Happy holidays, yeah.
Happy holidays.
Maybe you could do like the stocking stuffer episode where you could have little things.
That's what I did. That's what I was uploading when you got here.
Oh, you guys are in for some good stuff then.
Yeah.
All right.
Until next time, friends, Be nice, work hard, ride bikes, play music when you can. Talk to you soon.
Keep the rubber side down.